Talk about change if you're a leader. The IRA breakout, which the IRA people called the Great Escape, led to about, I think it was 27 of them, getting out of the maze. And they included two guys, Vic McFarlane and Jerry Kelly, who went on the run and were picked up a couple of years later in Holland with 100,000 rounds of ammunition, some guns and so on. And this was very interesting because the British government wanted them extradited because they were murderers and terrorists, was the British government's view. They said to the Dutch government, don't extradite us, we're freedom fighters. I persuaded the BBC to let me make a little film about these guys. And Holland being Holland, they let me into the jail, and the IRA being the IRA, they were very happy to talk to me. I was standing at Stormont with a TV crew when a guy comes out of the front of the Stormont Parliament wearing a much nicer suit, I might say, than I'm wearing, a better shirt and a better tie. And it was one of the two IRA guys. And he saw me and he walked across and said, Garvin, can I have a word with you? And I thought, this is interesting. Maybe he's borne a grudge after 10 years. I can't think what it was that I said in the documentary that would have irritated him. We went for a little walk round the corner and he said, tell me, should I smile more on television? Osama bin Laden knew how to use the media. These guys knew how to use the media, and they knew how to communicate and use stories to bring about change. Everybody does it. It's just some of us are more aware of it than others. Thanks very much.
Storytelling, I've got to agree with Gavin, is at the very heart of the human condition. It's our basic language. It's how great ideas and concepts are transmitted, is through storytelling. And every single piece of communication or presentations that we make is in fact a story, and if it isn't, it jolly well should be. Story is just one part of the holy trinity of great communication. And that is story, status and focus. SSF, ladies and gentlemen. And the good news is we don't have to go any further than that. Once we get a handle on SSF, story, status, focus, that is it. Now, the sort of status I want to talk to you about today has nothing to do with positions of power, or hierarchy, or wealth, or social standing. Nothing to do with those things. It's purely about perception. How we're perceived, how we perceive other people, how we want to be perceived too. And if there were a scale of 1 to 10 on status, 10 wouldn't be the best, 1 wouldn't be the worst. In fact, they're both as bad as each other. The strong area is the middle ground, and it's physical, it's vocal, and it's emotional too. Now, I have to say, Gavin, I think there was one person who got it right every single time. Like him or not, like his politics or not, but I thought Bill Clinton was right in that mid-level when he communicated. And I think he's still one of the finest communicators we've got today. And a great illustration of this is after 9/11. Bush looked like a rabbit in the headlights, paralysed. Clinton was walking the streets hugging people. People were literally throwing themselves into his arms. Why? Because he was open, accessible, approachable and strong.
You see what I mean about an eclectic panel. We've got different sorts of experiences. We are going to talk about the economy, but not just in the language of economists. But for me, with my sort of current affairs, my BBC hat on, I want each of you just to begin with a basic thought about where we are in Britain right now. You can read all sorts of different figures. Housing market looks pretty dull, stagnant if not worse, and yet we've just had retail sales figures for the last month which aren't too bad. So, should we be optimistic, pessimistic about where Britain is right now? Let's start with you, Dennis.
Well, I suppose the good news, the best news of all, is recession is over. Technically, statistically, any way you want to define it or measure it, the recession has ended. Now, I'm sure everybody here knows what a recession is. I mean, it's that time when even those who've got no intention of paying you stop buying. But what we had was 6 quarters of negative growth. We've had 4 quarters of positive growth. There was a blip at the back end of last year, largely weather-related. And then the economy got back on track. There are some problems, but it does seem to me the underlying strength of the economy is pushing us forward and upwards very slowly.
Basically, the banks need to start lending. They're not lending to businesses. I sit on the board of the Prince's Trust, and some of the disaster stories that are out there are unbelievable. I got made redundant 14 years ago from the East End of Glasgow, and Yes, I started off with an idea of a bra, and now it's the biggest lingerie company in the UK, and we're going on to launch beauty and dresses, etc., etc. But back then, 14 years ago, it was really tough to get the banks to support me. I would not like to start a business now. But what's going on in China at the moment is something that no one has ever seen, where manufacturing prices have gone up probably almost double. Shipping prices have gone up. People don't want to be in a factory, and the factory's trying to keep the workers there is very, very challenging as well. If we can just start having a balance in the UK, where it's a balance for employees versus employers, at the moment that balance is not correct. If we can fix the balance, then I think within the next 8 to 10 years we will gain the manufacturing business back in the UK, without question, because the lead times are not workable for businesses at the moment. But at the moment, I wouldn't want to employ 1,200 more people in the UK. It would be a nightmare.
We really have seen it all before, and we've heard all the same words before, and we've heard all the same observations before, and my view on it is not glass half full, glass half empty. It's 7 fat years and 7 lean. You go through very good periods and you go through not such good periods. And at the moment we're going through a not very good period, and no doubt in a few years' time it will change again, and everybody will say boom or bust. There's no more boom or bust. It's all going to be boom forever, and so on and so forth, as they always do. The creative industries in Britain not only attract very many British people, but they also attract, and I think this is particularly relevant, they also attract people from all over the place, from the United States, from Malaysia, from China, from India, from anywhere else that you want to talk about. So if you're talking about added value on British products, certainly in terms of British services, the kind of branding and creativity in all kinds of things like computer games that we can make and can sell is really very considerable.
In the old days when I was a lad, if you said manufacturing, it was belching factory chimneys. It was working classes swanning around factories all day in greasy overalls and racing whippets at weekends. It's not like that anymore. In the old days, manufacturing was cheap. It's now smart. It used to be bulk. It's now added value. We've changed the structure of manufacturing.
But perception...
We need a bit more of it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, it's a fascinating stat. And
Thank you.
I'm delighted you just chucked it out there. But it probably doesn't match most people's perception of what is going on in Britain today. And that's where I want to bring Wally in.
From where I sit, of course it's right that we should continue to focus on manufacturing, or focus more again on manufacturing. But this isn't a zero-sum game. There is no reason why, because we happen to focus on manufacturing as well, we shouldn't also focus on the creative industries. We shouldn't also focus on the financial service industries. And if there's anything else we can focus on that is good for us, that we can really develop effectively, we should focus on that too. In terms of the kind of business that I operate in, made in Britain, specifically made in London, means, give or take a bit, you can charge more for it. Country of origin effect, it may be whiskey, it may be Burberry, it may be your kind of product. Certainly in our kind of product, does add value.
It's a powerful thought, but Michelle, you're not entirely...
I'm sorry, but no one gives a toss these days. They really don't. When you go into Debenhams, it's all about price. I don't mean that they're at the bottom end like Asda and Tesco.
Burberry's
well, you get a different customer that goes into these retailers like Gucci and Prada. That's a different customer. When you're going into the high street like M&S and Debenhams, honest to goodness, if I was to say to them, I'm going to charge you £10 more for a bra because it's made in Britain, they'd say, so what?
And on that note, panel, as Wally rightly observed, my God, I've heard some great stories from this panel today. I promised you that economics would not be boring, and it has been anything but. And we're running out of time, so I just want to thank Wally, Michelle, Dennis. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them all a very warm round.